I stand outside the luxury ballroom where my wedding reception is supposedly happening, watching through the massive windows as my sister Madison cuts into an anniversary cake while wearing a white dress that matches my original wedding gown design. My parents beam with pride in the background, completely unaware that I already got married 3 hours ago at a small chapel across town with my closest friends as witnesses. The $50,000 bill for tonight's celebration sits in my purse, along with the signed contracts that will destroy my family's financial future forever. 6 months earlier, everything seemed perfect. I had just gotten engaged to Jake, my boyfriend of 4 years who worked as a high school history teacher. We met in college and had been inseparable ever since. Jake was everything I wanted in a partner: kind, intelligent, and genuinely supportive of my career as a nurse practitioner at the county hospital. When I called my parents to share the news, their excitement felt overwhelming. Mom Linda started crying tears of joy on the phone, while Dad Robert immediately began talking about venues and guest lists. They owned a successful real estate brokerage in our hometown of Riverside, California, and had always been generous with family celebrations. "We want to give you the wedding of your dreams," Mom said during our first planning meeting at their sprawling ranch-style home. "You've worked so hard through nursing school and establishing your practice. This is our gift to you." My older sister Madison arrived halfway through the conversation, her designer handbag catching the afternoon light streaming through the kitchen windows. At 30, she had always been the golden child in our family. Valedictorian in high school, graduated summa cum laude from USC, married her husband Trevor right after college, and now owned a boutique that catered to wealthy clients in Newport Beach. "Anna Mary's getting married," Mom announced as Madison poured herself sparkling water from the expensive bottle she always carried. Madison's smile seemed genuine as she hugged me. "That's wonderful news. Jake's a catch. Have you thought about the venue yet?" Dad spread brochures across the granite countertop. "We're thinking the Riverside Country Club. It's elegant, has beautiful gardens, and can accommodate 200 guests comfortably." My stomach tightened slightly. Jake and I had discussed a smaller celebration, maybe 75 people at most, but seeing my parents' enthusiasm, I pushed down my concerns. 200 seems like a lot," I ventured carefully. "Nonsense," Dad waved dismissively. "We have business associates, your extended family, church friends. You'll want everyone there to celebrate your special day." Madison settled into the chair beside me, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against the table. "When are you planning the ceremony?" "We were thinking late September," Jake answered. "The weather should be perfect, and it gives us enough time to plan properly." Something flickered across Madison's face before she smiled again. "September is lovely. Trevor and I got married in September, too." Mom's eyes lit up. "That's right. Your 5th anniversary is coming up in September." The conversation continued around me as they discussed flowers, photographers, and caterers. Jake squeezed my hand under the table, sensing my growing unease about the scale of celebration they were planning. That evening, as Jake drove us back to my apartment, he voiced what I was thinking. "Your parents seem really excited about this wedding." "Too excited, maybe," I admitted. "I love that they want to contribute, but 200 people feels enormous." "We can scale it back," Jake said reassuringly. "It's our wedding, not theirs." 2 weeks later, we returned to my parents' house for another planning session. Madison was already there when we arrived, sitting at the dining room table with wedding magazines spread in front of her. Mom had prepared an elaborate lunch, complete with china, that only appeared for special occasions. "I've been researching photographers," Madison announced, as we sat down. "There's this amazing woman who did Senator Williams' daughter's wedding last year. She's expensive, but her work is incredible." I flipped through the portfolio she handed me. The photos were stunning, but I could see Jake calculating costs in his head. As a teacher, his salary was modest, and while I made decent money as a nurse practitioner, we were still paying off my student loans. "These are beautiful," I said carefully. "But maybe we should look at some other options, too." Dad set down his fork with more force than necessary. "Anne-Marie, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. You don't want to look back and regret cutting corners. The weight of their expectations pressed down on me like a physical force. I had always been the compliant daughter, the one who avoided conflict and tried to keep everyone happy. Madison had been the achiever, but I had been the peacekeeper. You're right, I heard myself saying. Let's book her. Jake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he stayed silent. As lunch progressed, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Madison casually mentioned that her anniversary with Trevor fell on the exact same weekend we were planning the wedding. What a coincidence, Mom mused. September 28th for your anniversary, and September 29th for the wedding. Madison twirled her wedding ring absently. It really is. Trevor and I were just talking about how we wanted to do something special for our 5th anniversary. It's such a milestone. 5 years. Mom repeated wistfully. That's when couples really settle into their rhythm, isn't it? The conversation should have moved on, but it didn't. Instead, Mom's eyes took on that calculating look I recognized from her business dealings. You know, she said slowly, as if the idea was just occurring to her. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could somehow celebrate both milestones together? Think of the efficiency and how special it would be for our family to have such joy in one weekend. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire nobody wanted to acknowledge. Madison's expression remained neutral, but I caught something in her eyes that made my chest tighten. Jake shifted beside me. I'm not sure I follow. Just a thought, Mom said breezily, but her tone suggested she had been thinking about this much longer than the past 30 seconds. Having both celebrations the same weekend. Very convenient for out-of-town family. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, watching the ground crumble beneath my feet, but I couldn't quite understand why. Against my better judgment, I agreed to coordinate the celebrations, thinking it meant having both events the same weekend, but keeping them separate. I should have known better. My parents had a way of taking an inch and stretching it into a mile, especially when Madison was involved. The first sign of trouble came during our next meeting, when Mom casually mentioned she had changed our venue. The country club was nice, she said, sorting through new brochures. But the Grandview estate can accommodate both celebrations much better. They have multiple ballrooms and gorgeous outdoor spaces. I picked up the glossy brochure featuring a mansion-like venue with manicured grounds and crystal chandeliers. The price tag at the bottom made me dizzy. Mom, this place costs 3 times what the country club charged. But think about what you get for that money. Madison chimed in from across the table. Elegance, sophistication, room for everyone to enjoy themselves properly. Everyone. The guest list had somehow expanded from 200 to nearly 300 people. Madison's, business associates, Trevor's law firm colleagues, and distant relatives, I barely remembered now, filled multiple pages of carefully organized spreadsheets. Jake rubbed his temples. Maybe we should step back and think about what we actually want for our wedding. Dad looked up from his notebook with obvious irritation. What you want is a celebration that reflects well on your family. The Grandview estate is perfect for both the anniversary party and your wedding reception. Anniversary party, I repeated. Well, we can't ignore Madison and Trevor's milestone, Mom said, as if this was perfectly obvious. They'll need space for their guests, too. My sage green and cream color scheme disappeared next, replaced by Madison's preferred navy and gold. When I protested, Mom explained that navy was more sophisticated and would photograph better. The intimate ceremony I had envisioned transformed into something that sounded more like a corporate gala. We'll need upgraded catering for this many people. The wedding planner informed us during our consultation. The premium package includes past hors d'oeuvres, carved stations, and a champagne reception. I watched the numbers climb on her tablet screen. What about the standard package? Madison laughed, but not unkindly. Anna Marie, you can't serve basic food at the Grandview estate. People will notice. The wedding cake discussion became another battleground. I had wanted something simple and elegant, maybe 2 tiers with fresh flowers. Instead, we were now planning a 4-tier creation that incorporated anniversary elements alongside wedding decorations. Think about the photos, Mom urged. Madison and Trevor will want something beautiful for their anniversary pictures. Jake started staying quieter during these meetings, but I could feel his growing frustration. My friends Stephanie, Carla, and Nicole tried to be supportive, but even they seemed confused by the direction everything was taking. It feels like Madison is getting married again, Stephanie said gently after a particularly overwhelming planning session. Are you sure you're okay with all this? I wanted to say no, but the words wouldn't come. Disappointing my parents felt impossible, and Madison seemed so genuinely excited about celebrating together. Maybe I was being selfish. The photographer meeting delivered the biggest shock yet. I expected to discuss poses for our wedding portraits, but instead found myself looking at a detailed timeline that allocated 2 hours for anniversary shots before my ceremony. Well, start with Madison and Trevor in the garden, the photographer explained, highlighting sections of her proposal. Then move inside for family portraits with their original wedding party members who are attending. After that, well, have time for some quick shots of the bride and groom before the ceremony. Quick shots? For my own wedding? Excuse me, I interrupted. How much time did you set aside for our wedding photos? She flipped through her notes. About 40 minutes before the ceremony, then standard reception coverage. But don't worry. We'll get everything we need. I looked at the timeline again. Madison and Trevor were getting 2 hours of dedicated photography time, while Jake and I were allotted less than an hour. This seems uneven, Jake said, finding his voice. Mom waved her hand dismissively. The anniversary shots need more time because they're recreating poses from their original wedding. It's much more complex than standard wedding photography. That evening, I discovered Madison had ordered a white dress for the anniversary celebration. Not ivory or champagne or any other color that might be appropriate for someone attending another person's wedding. Pure white, in a style remarkably similar to the gown I had chosen. It's for the anniversary photos, she explained when I called to ask about it. We want to capture the same romantic feeling as our wedding day, but white at someone else's wedding. Oh, Anna Marie, we're family. Rules like that don't apply when we're celebrating together. The florist consultation revealed that centerpieces would feature photos from Madison and Trevor's original wedding alongside floral arrangements. My request for memorial candles honoring our deceased grandfather was noted but pushed to secondary priority due to space constraints. 3 weeks before the wedding, I attended what I thought was my bridal shower, only to find half the gifts were anniversary presents for Madison and Trevor. The decorations proclaimed celebrating love without mentioning names, and the cake featured 2 sets of dates, their original wedding date and ours. Isn't this efficient? Mom beamed as I unwrapped my 4th picture frame. Everyone can celebrate both couples at once. I smiled and nodded, but inside, something fundamental was breaking. This wasn't coordination anymore. It was absorption. My wedding was being systematically dissolved into Madison's anniversary celebration, and somehow I was supposed to be grateful for the privilege. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself cry. Jake held me as I sobbed out my frustration and confusion. We can still change this, he said softly. It's not too late to take back control. But it felt too late. Deposits had been paid, contracts signed, guests invited. The machinery of this combined celebration was too massive to stop, and I was caught in its gears. The worst part was that I still couldn't shake the feeling that I was being unreasonable. Madison and Trevor deserved to celebrate their anniversary. My parents were contributing significant money to make everything beautiful. Maybe sharing the spotlight was a small price to pay for such generosity. I fell asleep that night, wondering when exactly I had stopped feeling like the bride at my own wedding. The breaking point came during our final venue walkthrough. Standing in the ballroom, I realized that Madison's anniversary had become the main event, and my wedding was the opening act. 2 months before the wedding, the first invoice arrived in my mailbox like a bomb, wrapped in elegant stationery. $38,000 for catering, flowers, and photography. My name appeared at the top as the primary contact, with my address listed as the billing location. I stared at the numbers until they blurred together. Jake and I had budgeted $15,000 maximum for our entire wedding. This single invoice exceeded our combined annual savings. My hands shook as I called Mom. I just received a huge bill for the wedding expenses. There must be some mistake. Oh, honey. Yes, that's an error, Mom said quickly. The vendors got confused about the billing information. Dad's handling all the payments. Just ignore those invoices for now. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by suspicion. If Dad was handling payments, why would vendors send bills to my address? I had never given them my information as the primary contact. How did they get my address and name? The wedding planner probably mixed up her paperwork. You know how these big events can get complicated. Don't worry about it. But I was worrying. That night, I called 3 vendors directly. Each one confirmed that I was listed as the primary account holder and financial responsible party. Not my parents. Not Madison. Me. The wedding planner was more forthcoming when I pressed her for details. Your parents came in 2 weeks ago and updated all the contracts, she explained. They said you wanted to handle the financial aspects directly since you have excellent credit and steady income as a healthcare professional. I never agreed to that. Well, you'll need to discuss it with them. All the contracts have been signed and submitted. We're expecting full payment 30 days before the event. I hung up and immediately drove to my parents' house. I found them in the living room with Madison and Trevor, surrounded by vendor portfolios and fabric samples. They looked up as I burst through the front door like a woman possessed. We need to talk about the wedding expenses, I announced without preamble. Dad barely looked up from the catering menu in his lap. What about them? I'm listed as financially responsible for everything. The bills are coming to me, not you. That's just for insurance purposes, he said dismissively. Some vendors require the account holder to be under 40 for better liability coverage. Your mom and I are covering all the actual costs. Madison looked between us with concern. Is there a problem with money? The problem is that I'm on the hook for $50,000 worth of expenses that I never authorized. The room went quiet. Trevor set down his wine glass and studied his hands. Mom's smile faltered for the first time in months. Anne-Marie, Dad said in his business voice. We're family. You don't seriously think we'd stick you with bills we can't afford. Then why is my name on every contract? Because you make good money as a nurse practitioner, and banks trust healthcare professionals. It was easier to get approvals with your credit score and employment history. The explanation sounded reasonable, but something cold settled in my stomach. Show me your financial contribution paperwork. Excuse me. If you're paying for everything, there should be documentation. Show me the checks you've written or the credit arrangements you've made. Dad's jaw tightened. I don't appreciate being questioned like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm not calling you a criminal. I'm asking to see proof that you're actually paying for this wedding. Madison stood up abruptly. This is getting uncomfortable. Maybe Trevor and I should leave. No, stay, I said firmly. Since half this celebration is for your anniversary, you should know how it's being funded. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally, Mom spoke in a small voice. We've had some challenges with the real estate market this year. Sales are down, and we had to take out a loan against the house to cover some business expenses. What kind of loan? A home equity line of credit. But we put the application in your name because you qualify for better rates. My legs nearly gave out. You took out a loan against your house in my name. It's just temporary, Dad said quickly. Once the market improves, well, pay everything back and transfer the loan to our names. You committed fraud. You used my identity to secure a loan without my knowledge or consent. Trevor cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe Madison and I should definitely leave now. Actually, Trevor, maybe you can explain something to me. I turned to face my brother-in-law. Did you know about this financial arrangement? His face reddened. I knew your parents were being generous with the wedding budget. Generous with my credit, you mean? Madison stepped between us. Anne-Marie, you're getting hysterical. Mom and Dad would never hurt you financially. They already have. I've got $52,000 in debt attached to my name for a wedding that's become more about your anniversary than my marriage. The number hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mom started crying quietly. Dad's face had turned stone cold, the expression he wore during difficult business negotiations. If you don't want our help planning your wedding, just say so, he said icily. We can cancel everything tomorrow and you can plan whatever little ceremony you can afford. That's not the point, and you know it. Madison placed her hand on my shoulder. Maybe everyone should calm down and think rationally about this. I shook off her touch. Rationally? Let me think rationally. You get a $5,000 anniversary party disguised as part of my wedding. Mom and Dad get to look generous in front of their friends and business associates. And I get to pay for all of it while being marginalized at my own celebration. Does that sound rational to you? You're being incredibly unfair, Madison said, tears starting in her eyes. We never asked for any of this. You didn't exactly refuse it either. Jake had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now he stood up. I think we should leave and discuss this privately. As we reached the door, Dad called after us. Anna Marie, if you walk out now, don't expect us to salvage this mess. The deposits are non-refundable, and the vendors expect payment whether you show up or not. I turned back to face him. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you the financial reality. You wanted to know the truth about money? Here it is. You're responsible for every penny, and that's not changing. So you can either have a beautiful wedding celebration that includes your sister's anniversary, or you can have a financial disaster and no wedding at all. The ultimatum echoed in my ears as Jake and I left. In the car, he gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. They planned this, he said quietly. From the beginning, they planned to make you pay for Madison's party. I knew he was right, but admitting it felt like acknowledging that my own parents had deliberately betrayed me. The people who were supposed to protect me had set me up to be financially exploited for my sister's benefit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look on Madison's face when I confronted them. Not surprise or shock, but discomfort at being caught. She had known. Maybe not all the details, but she had known enough. The next morning brought another revelation that shattered what remained of my trust. 1 month before the scheduled wedding, I arrived at the venue for our final walkthrough and discovered a nightmare that exceeded my worst fears. The ballroom had been transformed into a shrine to Madison and Trevor's marriage, with my wedding relegated to what looked like an afterthought. Anniversary banners hung from the crystal chandeliers, featuring photos from their original wedding ceremony 5 years ago. The head table displayed a timeline of their relationship milestones, complete with professional portraits from each year of their marriage. My wedding cake had been moved to a side table, while their anniversary cake commanded center stage. This is what we discussed, the venue coordinator said cheerfully, consulting her notes. Anniversary celebration from 6 to 8 p.m., wedding reception from 8 to 11 p.m. I stared at the room in disbelief. What happened to the wedding ceremony? Oh, that's been shortened to 20 minutes to allow more time for the anniversary presentation. Your parents felt it was important to properly honor your sister and brother-in-law's journey together. 20 minutes. They had compressed my wedding ceremony to 20 minutes. Jake's voice came out strained. What kind of anniversary presentation? The coordinator flipped through her folder enthusiastically. Madison and Trevor will renew their vows at 7:30, followed by a slideshow of their 5 years together. Then speeches from family members about the importance of lasting marriage. It should be very moving. Speeches about their marriage at our wedding reception. Well, technically it's a combined event now. The anniversary celebration flows right into your wedding reception. Very elegant transition. I walked around the ballroom like a ghost haunting her own funeral. Madison's preferences dominated every detail. The navy and gold color scheme had completely replaced my sage and cream vision. The flowers were varieties she had chosen for her original wedding. Even the menu reflected her dietary restrictions rather than mine. Where are the memorial candles for my grandfather? I asked, searching the layout for any trace of my personal requests. Unfortunately, we ran out of space with all the anniversary elements. Your mother felt the room might become too cluttered with additional decorative items. Too cluttered. My tribute to the grandfather who had walked me to school every day, who had taught me to drive, who had been more of a father figure than my actual father during my teenage years, was too much clutter for Madison's anniversary party. The photographer arrived as we were reviewing the timeline, and her schedule confirmed my worst suspicions. Madison and Trevor had been allocated 3 hours for professional photos, including outfit changes and location shoots around the grounds. Jake and I were scheduled for 30 minutes in the garden while guests were arriving. 30 minutes, Jake repeated incredulously. Well, work efficiently, the photographer assured us. The anniversary couple needs more time because they're recreating their original wedding photos for a special album. Your shots will be more spontaneous and natural. Spontaneous and natural. Code words for rushed and unimportant. That evening, I sat in my apartment with financial documents spread across the kitchen table. The numbers told a devastating story. My parents had not only put the wedding expenses in my name, but they had also opened a joint credit account without my knowledge and charged an additional $15,000 in anniversary-related expenses. Designer flowers flown in from Oregon, premium wine that Madison had specifically requested, a professional videographer hired exclusively to document the anniversary celebration, a string quartet for the vow renewal ceremony. None of these extras were for my wedding. They were for Madison's party, charged to my credit. I called the bank's fraud department and discovered that my parents had used my social security number and employment information to establish credit accounts, listing themselves as authorized users, technically legal since I was their daughter, but ethically bankrupt. You can dispute the charges, the representative explained, but you'll need to prove that you didn't authorize the account creation and usage. My signature isn't on any of the applications. Unfortunately, verbal authorization from family members is often accepted for adult children. You'll need documentation showing you explicitly refused permission for these charges. Documentation I didn't have because I had trusted my own parents. Jake found me crying over the paperwork when he arrived for dinner. How bad is it? $67,000. They've charged $67,000 to accounts in my name. He sat down heavily in the chair across from me. For one night, for Madison's fantasy anniversary celebration that happens to include our wedding as a sidebar attraction. I showed him the itemized expenses. Premium champagne for the anniversary toast. Professional makeup artists for Madison's photo shoots. A horse-drawn carriage entrance that I had never discussed or approved. Luxury hotel rooms for their out-of-town guests. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Jake said, studying the charges. Look at this. Anniversary remembrance gifts for guests. They ordered custom crystal ornaments with Madison and Trevor's names and wedding date. What about our guests? What do they get? Nothing. According to this, your parents canceled the wedding favors you originally chose because they conflicted with the anniversary theme. The cruelty of it took my breath away. My own wedding had been systematically dismantled and rebuilt around my sister's celebration, and I was expected to pay for the privilege of being marginalized at my own event. A text from Madison appeared on my phone. Can't wait for the big celebration. Trevor and I are so grateful you're letting us share your special day. You're the best sister ever. I stared at the message until Jake gently took my phone away. She doesn't know, I said weakly. She knows enough. Nobody plans a vow renewal ceremony at someone else's wedding without knowing exactly what they're doing. The next morning brought the final crushing blow. I met with Mom for what I thought would be a last attempt at reconciliation, but instead found myself facing an ultimatum that revealed the true depth of their manipulation. We need you to sign these final contracts, Mom said, sliding a folder across the table at the coffee shop where we met. Just some insurance paperwork and payment authorization forms. I opened the folder and found documents that made my blood freeze. The contracts officially designated me as the primary financial responsible party for all wedding and anniversary expenses, with no mention of parental contribution or reimbursement. Even worse, They included a clause stating that I agreed to split billing equally with Madison for what was now officially termed a dual celebration event. Equal billing? I'm paying for half of Madison's anniversary party in addition to my own wedding. It's only fair, Mom said defensively. You're both getting beautiful celebrations. Madison gets 3 hours of professional photography, a vow renewal ceremony, a special anniversary cake, custom decorations, and premium wine. What do I get? A lovely wedding reception with your family and friends. After her anniversary celebration ends, using her decorations, with her timeline. Mom's voice took on that manipulative tone I recognized from childhood arguments. Anne-Marie, I'm disappointed in your attitude. Madison is going through a difficult time right now. She really needs this celebration to feel special and loved. What kind of difficult time? She's been trying to get pregnant for over a year. She and Trevor are starting fertility treatments next month, and this might be their last anniversary before everything changes with medical procedures and stress. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Madison was struggling with infertility, and somehow that meant I should finance her anniversary party and surrender my wedding day. I'm sorry she's going through that, but it doesn't justify what you've done to me financially. She doesn't know about the money situation, Mom said quickly. We told her you were happy to share expenses because you make more than Trevor does right now. Another lie. Trevor was a successful attorney who earned twice my salary. Mom, do you understand that I'll be in debt for the next 5 years paying for this celebration? You'll figure it out. You're resourceful and hardworking. Madison is more fragile right now. Fragile. The golden child was fragile, so the dependable daughter would sacrifice her financial future and wedding day to make things easier. I signed the contracts, but as I wrote my name, I was already planning my escape. They wanted me to be responsible for their scheme. I would show them exactly what responsibility looked like. That afternoon, I called my best friend Stephanie and told her everything. Then I began making plans that would give my parents precisely what they deserved. 3 weeks before the scheduled wedding, I sat in Stephanie's living room, surrounded by new vendor brochures and a fresh determination that felt like armor around my heart. While my parents orchestrated their elaborate deception, I would orchestrate something far more powerful. The truth. Are you absolutely sure about this? Stephanie asked, reviewing the timeline I had sketched out on her coffee table. As my maid of honor and closest friend since college, she had watched the entire nightmare unfold with growing outrage. I'm sure. They want me to pay for Madison's anniversary party? Fine. But they're not going to humiliate me in the process. Stephanie's boyfriend, Marcus, who worked as a paralegal, looked up from the contracts I had brought. These documents are legally binding, but there are some interesting loopholes. If you can prove financial duress or misrepresentation, you might have grounds to challenge them. I'm not interested in challenging them. I'm interested in beating them at their own game. Carla arrived with coffee and pastries from the bakery where she worked as a manager. Behind her came Nicole, who had driven down from San Francisco for our emergency planning session. My real wedding party was assembling, and for the first time in months, I felt surrounded by people who actually cared about my happiness. Tell me what you need, Carla said simply. I spread out my notes across the table. I need a real wedding. Small, intimate, meaningful. Everything my parents have taken away from me. Nicole opened her laptop. I've been researching venues. There's a historic chapel about 20 miles from the Grandview Estate, Sacred Heart Chapel. Built in 1895, seats about 50 people. Absolutely gorgeous. She showed me photos of a stone chapel with stained glass windows and wooden pews worn smooth by generations of worshippers. Sunlight streamed through the colored glass, creating patterns of blue and gold on the altar area. It's perfect. I breathed. Stephanie pulled up the chapel's website on her phone. They have an opening on September 29th. Same day as your parents' event. The ceremony could be at 2 p.m. 3 hours before the anniversary celebration starts. I calculated aloud. Enough time for a real ceremony, photos, and a reception. Then I could still appear at the other event. Marcus raised his eyebrows. You're planning to attend both. I'm planning to expose the truth. My parents want everyone to think they're generous hosts throwing a beautiful wedding for their daughter. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of hosts they really are. Over the next 2 hours, we planned a wedding that felt like coming home after months of being lost. The chapel ceremony would include all the elements my parents had removed. Memorial candles for my grandfather, personal vows that Jake and I would write ourselves, music that meant something to us rather than Madison's preferences. What about the reception? Nicole asked. Carla had already thought of that. There's a garden restaurant called Rosemary's about 10 minutes from the chapel. They do intimate celebrations. I called during my lunch break, and they can accommodate 25 people for a brunch reception. 25 people, just our closest friends and Jake's family, who had been increasingly horrified by my parents' behavior. Jake's parents had offered multiple times to contribute to wedding expenses, but my parents had refused their help, claiming they had everything under control. Jake's mom will cry with happiness, I said, thinking about how marginalized his family had been in the current wedding plans. They've been so gracious about all this chaos. Stephanie leaned back in her chair. What about your parents? When do you tell them? I don't. Not until it's too late for them to interfere. Anne-Marie, that's risky. If they find out beforehand, they won't. I'm going to keep playing along with their plans while secretly organizing this. Let them think they've won. Marcus looked concerned. What about the financial aspect? You're still legally responsible for their bills. I pulled out a folder I had prepared. I've been documenting everything. Every conversation, every contract change, every expense they've added without my approval. I'm also recording our interactions now. I showed them the small digital recorder I had purchased. California is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. Everything they say to me from now on will be documented. You're really doing this? Nicole said with admiration. I'm really doing this. The real wedding planning felt like breathing fresh air after months of suffocation. Jake's family embraced the secret ceremony with enthusiasm that reminded me why I had fallen in love with him in the first place. His mother, Susan, cried when I called to invite them to the real celebration. I was so hoping you would find a way to take back your wedding day, she said through tears. This whole situation has broken our hearts. Jake's father offered to walk me down the aisle since my own father would be busy hosting Madison's anniversary party. The gesture meant more to me than any expensive flower arrangement my parents had ordered. Planning the real celebration required careful coordination. I arranged everything through vendors my parents didn't know, using my personal email account that they couldn't monitor. Payments came from my savings account, which hurt financially but felt emotionally liberating. The chapel's wedding coordinator, Mrs. Rodriguez, understood immediately when I explained the situation. I've seen this before, she said sadly. Families who lose sight of what weddings are actually about. You're doing the right thing by creating your own sacred space. Will you help us keep this completely confidential until the day of? Absolutely. We take privacy very seriously here. 2 weeks before the wedding, I had my dress fitting for both celebrations. The gown I had originally chosen hung in my closet, never altered to fit properly because my parents kept changing the ceremony details. For the real wedding, I bought a simpler but more beautiful dress from a boutique that specialized in intimate ceremonies. The new dress felt like me. Classic lines, delicate lace, comfortable enough to move in naturally. When I put it on, I looked like a woman getting married to the love of her life, not a performer playing a role in someone else's production. Jake saw me in the dress during a private moment at the boutique, and his eyes filled with tears. This is how you should look on our wedding day, he said softly. Happy, radiant, not stressed and heartbroken. 1 week before the scheduled celebrations, my parents presented me with the final contract modification that would seal their fate. The document required me to take complete financial responsibility for all expenses, while officially designating the event as a joint celebration with equal prominence given to both couples. I read through the contract carefully, noting the clauses that made my parents co-signers for any charges they personally authorized. They had been so focused on making me responsible for costs that they had created legal language that could be turned against them. "This looks fine," I told them, signing with a steady hand. Mom smiled with relief. "I'm so glad we worked everything out. Madison is just thrilled that you're being so generous about sharing your special day." "Where is Madison today?" I asked casually. "Final dress fitting. She's so excited about the anniversary photos." The photographer suggested she might want to get some individual shots before the group pictures. Individual anniversary photos during my wedding day. The audacity was breathtaking. That evening, I called Madison directly for what I knew would be our last honest conversation before everything exploded. "I wanted to thank you for including Trevor and me in your wedding celebration," she said warmly. "It means the world to us to be part of your special day. Are you looking forward to the anniversary photos?" "Oh, so much. The photographer thinks we can create something really artistic with the venue's lighting. Trevor even rented a tuxedo that matches his original wedding outfit." "What about my wedding photos? Are you planning to be in those too?" There was a pause that lasted too long. "Well, we'll all be family photos together, won't we?" "Right, family photos. Anna Marie, is everything okay? You sound strange." "Everything's perfect, Madison. Absolutely perfect." After I hung up, I sat in my apartment looking at two completely different wedding invitations. The real ones, cream-colored and elegant, had been sent to 25 people who loved Jake and me unconditionally. The fake ones, navy and gold with anniversary elements, had been sent to 300 people who were expecting a show. In less than a week, both audiences would get exactly what they deserved. Jake found me staring at the invitations when he came over for dinner, having second thoughts. No. For the first time in months, I'm having first thoughts. Clear, honest, purposeful thoughts about what I actually want. And what do you want? I want to marry you in front of people who celebrate our happiness instead of exploiting it. I want photographs that capture our love, not someone else's anniversary. I want to start our marriage with integrity instead of resentment. He sat beside me on the couch. "Even if it means completely breaking with your family, Jake. My family broke with me first. They just expected me to smile and pay for the privilege." The night before our wedding day, I packed 2 separate bags. One for the real celebration, one for the performance I would give at my parents' event. Everything was in place. The chapel was decorated with flowers that Jake and I had chosen together. The photographer understood our timeline and priorities. The restaurant had prepared a menu that reflected our tastes, rather than Madison's dietary restrictions. I fell asleep holding Jake's hand, dreaming about a ceremony where I would be the bride instead of the supporting actress in someone else's story. Tomorrow, my parents would learn what it meant to sign contracts with someone who had nothing left to lose. September 29th dawned crisp and clear, with morning sunlight streaming through my apartment windows like a blessing. While my parents and Madison prepared for what they thought was my wedding day, I was getting ready for something far more precious, the real beginning of my marriage. Stephanie arrived at 8 a.m. with coffee and the quiet determination that had carried me through the planning process. "Are you ready for this?" I looked at myself in the mirror, wearing a simple robe, my hair in rollers, and felt more centered than I had in months. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Carla and Nicole arrived 30 minutes later with my real wedding dress and the flowers we had chosen. White roses mixed with eucalyptus, simple and elegant. No navy and gold ribbon. No anniversary elements. Just beauty for the sake of beauty. At 10 a.m., we drove to Stephanie's house, where Jake's family was gathered for pre-ceremony photos. Susan had prepared a light breakfast, and Jake's father had set up a small gift table for the few presents our real guests had brought. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Susan asked, hugging me carefully to avoid wrinkled my dress. "Like I'm finally getting married instead of performing in someone else's play." Jake's sister Emma, who was serving as my second bridesmaid, adjusted my veil with gentle hands. "I can't believe your parents don't know about this. They're too busy orchestrating Madison's anniversary celebration to pay attention to what I'm actually doing." At 11:30, Jake's father drove me to Sacred Heart Chapel, while the rest of the wedding party followed in a second car. The drive took 25 minutes through rolling hills covered in autumn colors, and I felt my heart settling into a peaceful rhythm for the first time in months. The chapel looked like something from a fairy tale. Mrs. Rodriguez had arranged white and green flowers along the aisle, and candles flickered in the late morning light filtering through stained glass windows. Jake stood at the altar in a simple dark suit, his face radiant with joy. 25 people who genuinely loved us filled the wooden pews. No business associates, no distant relatives brought in to impress potential clients. No one who would spend the ceremony thinking about property deals or legal cases. My real wedding ceremony lasted 45 minutes and felt like the most important thing that had ever happened to me. Jake's father walked me down the aisle, while classical guitar music played softly in the background. I carried my grandfather's pocket watch wrapped in ribbon, the memorial element that had been deemed too cluttering for the other celebration. Our vows were personal and heartfelt. Jake promised to protect me from people who would diminish my worth, even if those people were family. I promised to choose our love over the need to please others, even when that choice felt impossibly difficult. When the minister pronounced us husband and wife, the small congregation erupted in genuine celebration. No one was checking their phone or thinking about business networking. Everyone was simply happy that two people who loved each other had made a public commitment to build a life together. The photography session in the chapel garden captured everything my parents' photographer would miss. Intimate moments between Jake and me. Laughter with friends who had supported us through months of family drama. Quiet conversations with Jake's parents about the future we were building together. At 1:15, we drove to Rosemary's Restaurant for our reception brunch. The private dining room overlooked a garden where late roses still bloomed, and the staff had arranged our table with the exact centerpieces I had originally wanted. Small arrangements of white flowers with eucalyptus and single candles. The menu reflected our preferences perfectly. Fresh fruit salad instead of elaborate past appetizers. Quiche and smoked salmon instead of carved beef stations. Mimosas and coffee instead of premium champagne that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Jake's best friend David gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. Jake and Anne-Marie have shown us what it means to fight for your love story, even when other people try to rewrite it. They chose each other over everything else, and that's what marriage really is. By 3:30, our real wedding celebration was winding down. Guests began leaving with warm hugs and promises to visit soon. Jake and I sat alone at our table for a few minutes, holding hands and watching the last of the autumn sunlight play across the garden. "How do you feel, Mrs. Harrison?" Jake asked, using my new married name for the first time. "Complete," I said simply. At 4:15, I changed into my second dress, the elaborate gown my parents had helped me choose. The transformation felt like putting on costume for a play I no longer wanted to perform in, but I had one final scene to complete. Jake drove me to the Grandview estate, where Madison's anniversary celebration was already in full swing. We parked in the back lot and walked around to the front of the building, where I could see the ballroom through massive windows. Madison looked stunning in her white anniversary dress, cutting an elaborate cake while photographers captured every angle. My parents stood beside her and Trevor, beaming with pride as if they had personally orchestrated a royal wedding. The guest list included everyone who mattered to my parents' business and social standing: city council members, fellow real estate agents, wealthy clients who might provide referrals. The celebration looked exactly like what it was: a carefully staged performance designed to enhance my parents' reputation. At 5:30, I took a deep breath and walked through the front entrance of the venue. Anne-Marie. Mom rushed toward me with obvious relief. "Where have you been? Madison's been asking about you, and the photographer wants to start family pictures." "I was taking care of some last-minute details," I said calmly. Dad appeared at Mom's shoulder. "You look beautiful, sweetheart. Are you ready for your big moment?" I looked around the ballroom, taking in the navy and gold decorations, the anniversary timeline display, the guests, who were more interested in networking than celebrating love. Everything felt surreal after the authentic joy of our real wedding. Actually, Dad, I think everyone's already having their big moment. Madison spotted me from across the room and hurried over, her white dress flowing dramatically behind her. There you are. I was worried something had happened. Something did happen, I said, reaching into my purse for the folder I had prepared. Jake and I got married 3 hours ago at Sacred Heart Chapel. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Mom's face went blank with confusion. Dad's expression shifted from irritation to shock. Madison's mouth fell open. What do you mean? You got married? Mom whispered. I mean, we had a real wedding ceremony, with people who actually love us, followed by a reception where we were the center of attention instead of supporting actors in someone else's anniversary celebration. The conversations around us began to quiet as people noticed the tension in our small group. Trevor appeared, looking concerned about his wife's obvious distress. Anne-Marie, that's impossible, Dad said, his voice rising. Your wedding is here. Tonight. We've spent months planning this. You've spent months planning Madison's anniversary party. I just wanted a wedding. I pulled the contracts from my folder, including the final document they had made me sign. These contracts make you legally responsible for any charges you personally authorized without my explicit approval. Since I never approved a $50,000 anniversary party, you own every penny of this celebration. Madison grabbed my arm. Stop this. People are staring. Good. Let them stare. Let them see exactly what kind of family celebration this really is. I walked to the microphone that had been set up for anniversary speeches and tested it gently. The feedback got everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to celebrate Madison and Trevor's 5th anniversary. It's been a beautiful tribute to their marriage, and I'm sure you've all enjoyed sharing in their special milestone. The crowd murmured appreciatively, still not understanding what was happening. I wanted to let everyone know that Jake and I were married this afternoon at Sacred Heart Chapel, surrounded by our closest friends and family. We had a lovely, intimate ceremony followed by brunch at Rosemary's restaurant. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. People turned to each other with confused expressions. Tonight's celebration is entirely for Madison and Trevor, which is exactly what my parents wanted. They've worked very hard to create this beautiful anniversary party, and they've paid for every detail personally. I looked directly at Dad, whose face had turned an alarming shade of red. The bills are all yours, Dad. Every invoice, every vendor payment, every cost associated with tonight's anniversary celebration, I'm no longer financially responsible for any of it. I handed him the folder containing copies of all the documentation I had gathered, including recordings of conversations where they had admitted to using my credit without permission. Congratulations, Madison and Trevor. I hope you have many more happy anniversaries. I walked toward the exit, leaving behind the chaos erupting in the ballroom. Jake met me at the door, and together we walked out into the evening air. Behind us, I could hear Dad's voice raised in anger, Mom crying, and Madison trying to salvage her anniversary celebration as guests whispered among themselves about what they had just witnessed. How do you feel? Jake asked as we reached the car. Free, I said. For the first time in my life, completely free. The aftermath of September 29th unfolded like a slow-motion earthquake, with tremors that would reshape our family landscape forever. Within hours of my announcement, the carefully constructed facade of my parents' perfect celebration collapsed into chaos that echoed through our community for weeks. Jake and I drove home from the venue in peaceful silence, but our phones buzzed constantly with calls and texts. Word traveled fast through Riverside's social circles about what had happened at the Grandview estate. By the next morning, the story had reached everyone who mattered in my parents' business network. Susan called early Sunday morning with updates she had gathered from friends who attended the anniversary celebration. The party fell apart completely after you left. Madison locked herself in the bridal suite crying, and your father spent 2 hours on the phone with lawyers trying to figure out if he could force you to pay the bills. Can he? According to the contracts you showed me, Absolutely not. Has legally responsible for every penny. The financial reality hit my parents within 48 hours. Dad called Tuesday evening, his voice strained and angry. Anne-Marie, we need to talk about these vendor bills. What about them? You can't seriously expect us to pay $67,000 for your wedding celebration. I expect you to pay $67,000 for Madison's anniversary party, which is what you actually ordered and authorized. That's ridiculous. This was always meant to be your wedding. Dad, I have recordings of conversations where you explicitly said the celebration was for Madison and that I should be grateful to share my day with her. Do you want me to play them for the lawyers? The silence stretched until I thought he might have hung up. You planned this, he said finally. You deliberately set us up. I documented your scheme and protected myself from it. There's a difference. Your mother is devastated. Madison hasn't stopped crying since Saturday night. Then maybe you should have thought about their feelings before you decided to exploit mine. He hung up without saying goodbye. Madison called 2 days later, her voice small and broken. Anne-Marie, can we please talk? I had no idea about the money situation. You knew enough, Madison. You knew you were getting 3 hours of photography while I got 30 minutes. You knew you ordered a white dress for my wedding. You knew you planned a vow renewal ceremony during my reception. I thought we were sharing everything equally. When has anything in our family ever been equal between us? She was quiet for a long time. I'm sorry. I really didn't understand how unfair it had become. Her apology felt genuine, but apologies couldn't undo months of betrayal and financial manipulation. Madison, I'm glad you're sorry, but sorry doesn't fix what happened. What can I do to fix it? Nothing. You can't unfold a letter once it's been opened. You can't unsay words once they've been spoken. And you can't undo choices once they've been made. 3 weeks after the wedding debacle, my parents requested a family meeting. Jake and I met them at a neutral restaurant, where they looked smaller and older than I remembered. We've been thinking about everything that happened. Mom began carefully. We realize we may have gotten carried away with the planning. May have gotten carried away. We were trying to do something special for both our daughters, Dad added. Our intentions were good, even if our execution was flawed. Jake leaned forward. Your intentions were to make Anne-Marie pay for Madison's anniversary party while making yourselves look generous. There was nothing good about that intention. You don't understand the pressures of running a business in this community, Dad said defensively. Image matters. Reputation matters. More than your daughter's happiness. Of course not. But you chose image over integrity anyway, I interrupted. You chose Madison's celebration over my financial security. You chose your business reputation over my trust. Mom started crying quietly. We've lost you, haven't we? The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I wanted to cross. You haven't lost me, Mom, but you've lost the version of me that prioritized everyone else's comfort over my own well-being. What does that mean for our relationship? It means we start over with boundaries. It means I don't give you access to my financial information. It means I don't automatically agree to family plans that disadvantage me. It means I choose my own priorities instead of accepting yours. Dad's face hardened. So you're punishing us indefinitely. I'm protecting myself permanently. The conversation ended without resolution, but with understanding. My parents would never fully comprehend why their behavior was unacceptable, but they would have to live with the consequences anyway. 6 months later, Madison and Trevor announced they were expecting their first child. I sent a congratulations card and a modest gift, but didn't attend the baby shower. Madison and I had cordial but distant communication, like acquaintances who shared some family history but no longer shared trust. My parents paid every penny of the anniversary celebration costs, which forced them to downsize their house and scale back their business operations. The financial strain affected their marriage, and they separated briefly before reconciling with the help of a counselor who specialized in family dysfunction. Jake and I thrived in our marriage, building a life based on mutual respect and honest communication. We bought a small house across town, far enough from my parents to maintain healthy distance, but close enough for cautious reconciliation when the time felt right. Jake's family embraced me completely, offering the unconditional support I had never received from my own relatives. Susan became the mother figure I needed, and Jake's father walked me through major decisions with the wisdom and care my own father had never provided. 2 years after our real wedding, my parents asked to meet for coffee. They looked healthier than they had during the immediate aftermath, and Mom seemed more genuine in her remorse. "We've been in counseling," she said simply, "learning about boundaries and communication and respect. We understand now what we did to you, and we're sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. Not because of the financial consequences, but because we hurt you in ways that could have destroyed your relationship with us forever." Dad nodded slowly. "Your mother's right. We got so focused on appearances and what we thought was fair for Madison that we forgot to consider what was fair for you. We can't undo what we did," Mom continued. "But we want to learn how to have a healthy relationship with you going forward, if you're willing to try." The conversation lasted 3 hours and felt like the first honest discussion we had shared in years. I didn't forgive them immediately, but I agreed to work toward rebuilding trust through small steps and clear boundaries. Madison and I developed a different kind of relationship after her daughter was born. Becoming a mother gave her perspective on family dynamics that she had never possessed before. She called one afternoon when her baby was 6 months old. "I keep thinking about how I would feel if someone treated Emma the way we treated you," she said without preamble. "I would be furious. I would never forgive it." "Madison, let me finish. I need to say this. I was so focused on my own struggles with infertility and my marriage that I didn't see how unfairly you were being treated. That doesn't excuse my behavior, but it explains why I was blind to it. I appreciate you saying that. I want to be the kind of mother who raises a daughter to stand up for herself the way you did. I want Emma to know she deserves equal treatment and respect, not just from strangers, but from family." Our relationship slowly healed through shared commitment to honesty and fairness. Madison couldn't undo her participation in my parents' scheme, but she could acknowledge it and learn from it. 5 years after the wedding that changed everything, Jake and I hosted an anniversary party for ourselves. 25 guests gathered in our backyard for an evening of good food, honest laughter, and genuine celebration. My parents attended, having earned their way back into my life through consistent respect for boundaries. Madison and Trevor came with their 2 children, and the conversation flowed naturally without underlying tension. Susan gave a toast that night that captured everything I had learned. Marriage isn't just about choosing the right person. It's about choosing yourself when other people try to make you disappear. Looking around at the faces of people who had supported Jake and me through our most difficult time, I realized that building a family isn't about blood relations or shared genetics. It's about choosing to love people who choose to love you back, without conditions or manipulation or hidden agendas. My real wedding day taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept unequal treatment, even from family. By standing up for myself, I didn't just save my wedding day. I saved my future from a lifetime of being treated as less important than everyone else's needs and wants. The lesson that changed my life was simple but revolutionary. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept. When you accept disrespect, you get more disrespect. When you accept manipulation, you get more manipulation. But when you demand dignity and fairness, you create space for real love to flourish. I learned that true family doesn't exploit your loyalty or manipulate your affection. True family celebrates your happiness without making it about themselves. True family supports your dreams instead of hijacking them for their own purposes. Most importantly, I learned that protecting your own well-being isn't selfish or mean or ungrateful. It's necessary. It's healthy. It's the foundation of every good relationship you'll ever have, including the one you have with yourself. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones who will exploit your love for them. When that happens, the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved is to refuse to participate in your own diminishment. Set boundaries. Demand respect. Choose yourself. Your future self will thank you for it, and the people who truly deserve your love will support you through it. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? How did you find the strength to stand up for yourself when the people you loved were the ones hurting you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes sharing our experiences helps others find their own courage. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you deserve to be celebrated, not just tolerated. You deserve to be prioritized, not just included. You deserve love that lifts you up, not love that requires you to make yourself smaller. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might need to hear that their happiness matters too. Your support means everything to me. Wishing you the courage to choose yourself and the wisdom to build relationships that honor your worth.